Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 343 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Check them out at PerformBetter.com. I'm your host, Anthony Renner. The show notes are located at my site, ContinueFit.com, or you can get it at StrengthCoachPodcast.com. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner, spoke to Coach Boyle about his version of the Spanish squat. We also talked about overhead kettlebell press that he has in his program. And we talked about coaching it or deciding who should use it in a group setting, and a study as well on targeted nutrition to treat patellar tendinopathy. All right, Naamly, it's the member experience platform for modern training gyms, puts all of your communication with your members in one place, allowing you to keep track of that communication. So important for retention. Go to Naamly.com. You can schedule a demo and get a feel for what it's all about. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. All right, today for the Naamly Hit the Gym with a Strength Coach segment, I have on Dr. Brian Yee, and he has the author of the book Unresolved, Harnessing Your Movement Story to End Chronic Pain. We're going to talk all about chronic versus unresolved pain. The problem that the physical therapy profession is facing, not only from an industry, but from the perception of the patient. Something he calls a movement story and pain narrative, and really best practices to get to the patient or client's story and apply it in treatment and exercise. What are some things that he wants to know in that story so that he's going to get out of his patients? And, really just digging into a client's history. And we touched on some symmetry, asymmetry, and imbalances. All right, for the KISS Marketing Business Secrets for Gym Owners with Vince Gabriele. Vince is going to tell a story about why, he doesn't have a calf machine at his gym, but he should. And it's really about the mistake that most gyms make in marketing small group training. So KISS Marketing is a digital marketing agency that helps fitness business owners make the big bucks from their marketing without feeling stupid, stressed, or wasting valuable time figuring it out on their own. If you need some help with your marketing, head over to kissmarketing.net. Book a free coaching call with Will Matheson, Vince Gabriele's secret marketing weapon. All right, for the Getting Started with VBT or Velocity-Based Training segment, brought to you by Perch. Perch is a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing VBT into the 21st century. The cameras effortlessly quantify weight room performance without detracting from it. This week, Nika Willett will speak about using VBT to monitor and track fatigue. So lots of uses for the Perch and for using VBT, as you've learned over the last bunch of episodes with Nika and Perch. All right, don't forget the huge summer sale at Perform Better. It's still going on. It's going on until September 30th. There is 40% off a ton of items, including the TRX suspension trainers, ultimate sandbags, all kinds of cleaning supplies, Rolga rollers, plyo boxers, and so much more. Guys, check it all out at PerformBetter.com. All right, lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. You can try the new StrengthCoach.com out for 7 days for free. Totally new format, user-friendly, the same great forum as always. We're going to talk about a couple forum posts, actually, and some articles that were on there. It's the place where top coaches in the industry come to connect and learn. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing excellent, Anthony. How are you?
Excellent. I saw Michaela, Cindy posted Michaela leaving the driveway on a new chapter of her life. You got to be excited about that.
We are excited. It's gonna be fun. The cool thing about this women's professional hockey league that she plays in is that they play in a lot of places that are fun to visit. So it's going to be nice to go to Montreal, and it's going to be nice to go to Toronto, and it's going to be nice to go to New York City, even though they're going to play in Newark. So we'll get to do a little bit of traveling, but we'll get to go to some places that we like and be able to watch her play hockey, it's much better than Pittsburgh and Erie and some of the places that we were going to before.
Absolutely. Now, I have a question for you, and it'll show everybody how truly a parent should act. Are you going to any of Mark's golf matches?
No, he doesn't want us to, because all you can watch is them tee off. And he's like, I really don't want you to come and watch me tee off because I'm afraid I'll just freaking shank one. And so we haven't.
Nice.
But I would like to. Actually, I would love to find a way to sneak out and watch, to be honest, because I'm amazed, actually. I thought he was full of crap, to be truthful, because he would always, the other guys would be like, oh, he thinks he's really good at golf. And they would say that just to kind of bust his balls a little bit. But then I'd ask him the other guys, and they were like, no, he's actually pretty good. He's getting pretty good. And so we thought when he tryouts, they basically got 3 free rounds or 27 holes or something, because it's a 9-hole course. So we thought, what the heck, go to golf tryouts. Sure. We got to play some golf for free. And then all of a sudden he came back after the first day and he was like, I did really good. I think I'm going to make it. And we were kind of like, really? So.
Yeah, it's awesome.
We were laughing because I did the 18 Strong podcast yesterday. And Mark, after they made the golf team, I sent them the top 50 golf pro thing, or golf fitness pros. I said, this is why you guys made the team, because 3 of the kids that trained with me made the team. I said, you've been training with one of the top 50 golf fitness professionals in the world and you didn't even know it. And
I love it.
So Mark can't. He refuses. He thinks that he's finally admitted that I know something about strength and conditioning. But beyond that, he's 100% convinced that I don't know anything about anything else. He's always like, you don't know anything about lacrosse. You don't know anything about hockey. Don't know anything about golf. He's like, you do know something about strength and conditioning.
Nice. Well, at least you got that.
I should take that as a win.
Yeah, I mean, my wife said to me once, she's like, you have to be the worst personal trainer I've ever come across. She's like, I don't know how you get any clients. So there's that. So moral of the story, don't train your wife. Coach, let's talk about the Spanish squat with anchor point bands. You posted a video, but when you show it, it looks like normal squat mechanics. And when you look at a lot of the videos, majority of them, the mechanics are more like a wall sit and like supposedly like much more quad dominant. And he actually, in the post you were talking about, like, I really feel like it should be called Patellar Femoral Friendly Posterior Weight Shift Squat, the PFF PWSS. Can you expand on this a little bit?
Yeah, I think you could do it in a way more kind of super knee dominant method, like you said, like a ball wall squat kind of thing. But I don't think you need to. I think all you really need to do is to create that posterior weight shift. So we get the knees over ankles. I'm the knees over ankles guy. But what you also get is you get some abduction push. And I always say, your glutes are abductors and external rotators. So when you're getting that combination of hip extension, hip abduction, hip external rotation, and posterior weight shift, you generally will get somebody who's having knee pain out of knee pain. They will be able to squat pain-free. The band itself, those anchor point bands, and you weren't, I'm rubbing it in, you weren't in Providence, but the anchor point guy was in Providence, and he gave me some bands. I actually gave him to Ben Conley to give to me at the end. He said, bring these up to Mike. And the one thing that I noticed, because the bands they're not like, I want to say cloth, but they're not really cloth. They're kind of a rubberized fabric. I don't know what I would actually describe it as if I tried to. Kind of like, you ever use like a wrist wrap, an elastic wrist wrap?
Oh, yeah.
Sore wrist. They're that kind of material. So they're much more comfortable on your skin than the rubber band would be. So if instead of using like a 1 3/4 Perform Better super band and feeling like the hair on your leg is getting pulled off. These are really comfortable. And I've been using them a bunch with Mark to do we do Spanish squat, Spanish split squat, which again, I despise the name, but I can't come up with a better one right now. So I'm going to have to live with it. But it really is, I would encourage anybody, if you have anyone with patellofemoral pain. So, and I always kind of go back to the Jill Cook idea. Anybody who has knee pain that is not really true tendinitis is probably going to benefit from some of this posterior weight shift stuff.
Mike, have you played around at all? I don't think I asked you this question because we have talked about Spanish squats, but I just wanted to kind of go over because you were showing this video. But have you played at all with like a single leg version of this?
Yes, that's what we've been doing. I do that with Mark. That's how we split squat. So we do exactly that. We put it in there and same mechanics.
So you just split squat and you put it on the front, obviously the front knee, right under the knee, obviously.
Right under, exactly, like sort of right over the top of your calf. And again, same situation, because that was the one problem that we were running into with Mark during the ACL rehab was patellofemoral pain, which they say is you're going to have some of it until you get enough quad strength. Who was I reading? Actually, a bunch of guys have been sending me ACL stuff, but they were talking today about the fact that kind of 7, 8, and 9 month marks are where people really start to get some strength back. They start to and I've seen it with Mark, there's more things that he can do where he thinks, oh, this is fine, it doesn't hurt. And now we're able to, I think, pursue strength maybe a little bit more aggressively.
Yeah, believe it or not, I had my surgery, which again, don't want to compare it to Mark's surgery. I just had meniscus surgery, but I did rehab for 4 or 5 weeks. It was great, and I kind of got back into what I was doing. And the only thing is, you feel when you're starting to feel good, you kind of tend to not focus on it. And I really just started doing some single leg squats and trying to get a little bit lower right now. And almost like I was doing like yesterday, like a single leg box squat, almost like where just kind of making sure I'm pushing back and not having, and I did have I could feel a little bit. And so I know my quads, I know I need to get stronger, and I've got to focus on that a little bit more because I let it slide a little bit, but I think it's important.
Yes, it definitely is when you've had that. I said any knee pain except for true patellar tendinitis. And I always go back to the Jill Cook thing. Jill Cook put it so beautifully. She said, everybody except young jumping males probably has a patellofemoral problem and not a patellar tendon problem. She said, because true patellar tendinitis is basically young jumping males.
Okay.
You're none of those things.
Yes.
That's not true. You're male, so you're one of the 3.
There you go. Coach, interesting post here. Bobby Gazdia posted about, he noticed that the overhead kettlebell press it's in the MBSC fall phase 1. He's curious how to handle these in a group setting. He's only ever done landmine press in a group. How do you make the call on the mobility? Who has the mobility to do these? Do you look at FMS, shoulder mobility before the workout, or watch floor slides during the warm-up? You were kind of like, look, don't overthink it. I know Kevin Carr had posted some something about looking, about screens, and Brendan had posted the seated, like the floor slides. You were saying, hey, don't overthink it. Use the eye test. In a group setting though, should we be worried a little bit about this?
I think you should be worried a little bit, yes. But I think what happens sometimes is that, and particularly reading Bobby's posts, he worries about a lot of stuff. And so it's sometimes like, okay, worry a little bit less. And because the nice thing I always think kettlebell pressing is way more shoulder friendly than dumbbell pressing, which is way more shoulder friendly than bilaterally pressing a bar. So you're 2 or 3 steps down the scale already. And if you're doing a unilateral press or an alternating type of press, it's not as limited from a shoulder mobility standpoint as you would be if you were, say, like, if someone said, hey, I want to put bilateral behind the neck press in, I'd be like, ooh, that's going to be ugly. You're going to hurt some people. But I think I always talk about with the kettlebell press, because of where the kettlebell sits, you have an automatic external rotation component, which I think tends to recruit your subscap a little bit and make it more comfortable. So I just feel like just try it. Don't be too worried. I think sometimes people can worry themselves out of things. And it goes back. I love that quote. I've worried about many things, some of which actually happened. And I think sometimes when we're reading people on the forum, they're so deep in their studies that they're thinking, okay, well, what FMS, shoulder mobility, what if it's 2, what if it's a 1, you know what I mean? And it's like, well, wait a sec, just watch them. And if they can press it over their head and they say it doesn't hurt, you're probably okay. Would I, think, okay, do we want to go to, to kettlebell push press or, kettlebell snatch? No, probably not. But I think it's one of those things that you can try that's not probably going to turn into a bomb exploding in your face kind of thing.
Yeah, and a guy as thoughtful as Bobby is obviously going to be one of those coaches that will catch who is going to be having problems with them because he's thinking about it, and that's a good thing, to at least err on the side of caution. So
exactly, no, and that's the good. You're right, and I just sometimes I think you have to remind some of these guys that you can overwork.
Sure.
That's a thing.
It's all part of the learning process anyway, so it's good. Coach, speaking of learning and going back to kind of Spanish squats, I guess, Kevin posted about a study, stress relaxation and targeted nutrition to treat patellar tendinopathy. And what it was, 21-year-old NBA athlete, tendinopathy, had him undergo the following protocol: single leg extension, single leg press, Spanish squats, 2 times a week, blah, 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 some isometrics, 80% of 1RM. Now, they were also supplemented with some unflavored beef gelatin, however you want to call it, 200, and then some vitamin C. And this is based on research showing that the beef gelatin increases load-dependent collagen synthesis. And now there were some good results from this, but I, like you, have heard not even really mixed reviews, really a lot of, there's really been not a lot of great studies on this collagen protein. It seems to be all the rage right now. But also in a study like this, how do you know that the single leg extension, single leg press, Spanish squat seems to be really good, thoughtful programming and some isometrics? That wasn't really what did it. When you're throwing, I wonder if they had a special group just taking the supplements.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there is, and this was another, I got a lot of my knee info from the Jake Tura podcast, and I forget it. I want to say it was Keith Barr that was experimenting with this sort of vitamin C gelatin supplementation as it related to knee pain, and they were having some success. And then they're including the collagen protein idea, and the collagen protein thing is interesting because I talked to somebody, and I forget who it was because I'll kind of throw stuff out to people, John Berardi type people, somebody that I know who I think is really in the know from a nutrition standpoint more so than I, because I was getting, like you said, I had gotten hit up with 3 or 4 people who suddenly were selling collagen protein or had gotten involved with a company that was making collagen protein. And I thought, on the surface, this seems to make sense. Then I read somebody else's thing and they said, oh, collagen, it's like beaks and fingernails.
That's what I heard.
You know what I mean? And then I was like, okay, well, that's not good. And then I read somebody else said, oh my, this stuff is a game changer and it's going to cure all your joint aches. And so I can't seem to get a consensus, at least on the collagen protein part. So it's what I tend to find, I think historically, is the kind of thing, and I was thinking about, I'm rambling, but I think where there's smoke, there's fire. So if there's people out there that are researching who are saying, hey, this really works, there's probably a chance that some people are having success with it, because I go back to some of the old Paul Chek podcasts, and I think of some of the things that I heard him say that I thought were crazy. And then now I think, he wasn't so crazy. Some of the things he was saying 20 years ago that seemed crazy are pretty mainstream now. I can remember him talking about, I still remember to this day, he was doing a podcast talking about digestion and the gut and feces and all these things. And I was just like, this guy's out of his mind. What is he doing? I can't believe he's even doing this. Then it was probably an audio interview. It probably wasn't a podcast.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But then 10 years later, you think, wow, he was right on it in terms of gut health and all these things that now we would, I guess, look at and think, yeah, everybody does that. It's the same sort of 3 stages of truth idea. So I think there's something to it. I don't know what that something is, and I don't know what even the product is. When they talk about gelatin, I think, are they eating Jell-O? I mean, what are they doing? You know what I mean?
Beef Jell-O?
Like, is it like, is Bill Cosby involved in this whole thing?
Oh, no.
Sorry. All right, sorry. Shouldn't bring up Bill Cosby.
I was taking the collagen protein because it's like flavorless and just put it in my coffee right in the morning. But then Mike T. Nelson, who I really trust and I love his stuff, he had somebody on, and Mike had heard the same thing, really, like that the collagen, that the protein was really from, like you said, beaks and all these different, like what? And it was kind of crap. So I think you said it in the post, you just got to figure out who you trust and who you're going to listen to.
Yeah, and honestly, and I think that's one of the things we've done really well over the years with the podcast is had good people on who you can trust. But so much of what we're doing really does come down to that singular fact. Figure out who you can trust and then go with it. I was talking about that. I wrote a core training article. I actually used the core training article, or core training chapter, or a piece of it from my new book, and I gave it to Rob Pacey to put on his Sportsmith site. And you realize that, hey, for me, it's like, okay, I trust McGill. I think McGill's a smart guy, and this is what he says. I don't really kind of go under the hood of McGill's research. I don't go and read his research and look and think, do I like his scientific method? Do I agree with what he did? I just think, hey, here's a guy who's dedicated himself to back pain. I'm going to listen to him. Shirley Starman the same way. There's just people, but it really does come down to, you cannot be an expert in every area, but what you can hopefully be is a curator of experts for people, and be able to say to people, hey, this guy's smart. That's how I always talk when people ask me about nutrition. A lot of times I refer them to Berardi. I'm like, hey, go take Precision Nutrition. It's a good course. It makes sense. It's very commonsensical. It's not even, in a lot of ways, it's not even a nutrition course, really. It's a psychology course. But people have had good results with it, and I just like John, and I like the way they do things. And I think you have to have those people, and that's what I've been doing now lately, even with the ACL stuff, is going out and saying, okay, who do I really think? I just got Josh Funk. They just sent me their ACL course that I'm going to start trying to dig into. Yeah, you got to find your experts.
Yeah, I love the Dan Sullivan idea. He wrote a book a couple of years ago, The Strategic Coach, Dan Sullivan. Vince talks about him once in a while on the podcast. He wrote a book called Who, Not How. And the bottom line is, you got to find out, what he was saying is, don't ask, how do I do something like, I don't know, Facebook ads. Say, who can do this for me and better than me and is an expert at it, so I'm not going to waste my time on something that I really will never be an expert in because I don't have the time. I think it's a similar thing. Like, who are your people that you're really trusting? And so don't always ask, how am I going to do this? And you still want to, don't get me wrong, you still want to do your own education. But like sometimes there's a shortcut. And I always say this, it's why I never went to PRI course, because all the people that I trusted, you and Eric Cressy and Kevin Neal, we're all kind of coming back with the same 3 or 4 takeaways. And I'm like, it's over my head, first of all. So why have these guys that are smarter than me and go into this course coming back with 3 or 4 takeaways, and they're all the same takeaways? Why am I going to go? I understand I should go, blah, blah, blah. But there's some things you got to decide what you're not going to spend your time in.
I 100% agree. I think there is no question when you look at a lot of this stuff that, even with strength stuff, it's because people will always say stuff to me like, "Oh, who should I follow?" And sometimes I used to think that was a bad question. Be like, "What do you mean? Who should you follow?" But then I start realizing that that's really a lot of what we're going to do with people is help them find people to follow. Okay, who are the people who are going to be able to help you on your journey? And then you listen to those people, and maybe you do evaluate as you go, but in a lot of times, I think some of it is you trust those people and follow their recommendations. I did the 18 Strong podcast yesterday. I said if you look at our program, the MBSC or CFSC or whatever you want to call it, the Mike Boyle system, that's really how it was developed. It was developed by going to the Perform Better seminars and going in the early days, going to the NSCA and listening and aggregating ideas from lots of different people. And yet I would be the one a lot of times who'd say, "Oh, don't be a shit soup guy," right? That's not what you want to do, but you really can make a really good soup or a really good stew if you're really focused on getting the right ingredients and really understanding what you're doing. But even that takes a lot of time, much less than trying to say, okay, I'm going to become a subject matter expert in each one of these areas. If I looked at it and said, well, what I want to do is I want to sit down and learn more about low back pain than Stuart McGill, that would be dumb. It would just be a lot easier to look and think, okay, why don't I just let Stuart do that work for me? And whether, Mark Verstegen, there's so many people that I've spent time listening to and taking little bits and pieces of their ideas and making them ours.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at these things, just because you agree, you still find the common sense part of it. For example, Todd Wright, for me, he narrowed down some of the Gary Gray stuff. And when I went to his facility to look, I said, this is what I can take and put in my system seamlessly that works with my system. Same thing with the McGill thing. I think, in the very least, you could put in the big 3 and at least say, you know what? This guy's coming up with this thing. He kind of keeps repeating it. He does it for his general population. From the perspective of, is ACL training just good training type of an idea, just good programming? It's the same thing with some of these things that you can take out and be like, McGill keeps talking about the big 3. Worst I can do is just add some of this stuff in here, and it can fit easily into my system without making it look like shit soup.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, I don't know. There's just, I think the process of getting good at anything, and we go back all the time, but it goes back to the filter idea, right? Taking these things and filtering them out and deciding, okay, what am I going to use? What makes sense for me in my particular situation? And how can I best incorporate all these other people's expertise into what I'm trying to do?
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we will let you go. Coach, enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Cindy's gone. Michaela's on the road to Buffalo. Maybe take a nap or something.
That is what's next on my list. believe it or not.
All right, Coach, thanks for doing this.
All right, thank you.
Hey, it's Vince Gabriele. Welcome to Business Secrets for Gym Owners. I am here to bring you the worst mistake when marketing small group training. And I'm going to start this with a comical yet true yet disturbing story. So there's a long-running joke / serious push in my house about my calf size. And it comes from no one else except my lovely wife, Vanessa, who is a lifelong dancer and has two of the best calves I've ever seen on a human. And we're kind of like looking at the comparison of hers and mine. And I believe that for the first time ever, she has surpassed me in calf size. And so it was a bad day in my house. And, she urged me strongly to go and get a gym membership that had a calf machine. So that's what I did. And I went out and I got a gym membership that had a seated calf machine. Now, I also joined the gym for a couple other reasons, serious reasons. I actually think it's a pretty instructional thing to do for you as a gym owner, to go and look and see what other places are doing. And sometimes you need to go be a member to check it out. But there's a lot of things I've learned from there. When I signed up for the membership, they said these words to me. It's like, oh yeah, with your membership, you also get small group training. I was like, all right, cool. I get small group training. And that was the end of that. No one ever came out to me and asked me if I wanted to try a class. No one actually sent me an email talking specifically about this program. It was literally the sales pitch was when I signed up for the membership, they said, oh yeah, we do small group training too. It's really cool. And I was like, great, thanks. And remember now, I know everything there is to know about small group training. I've been teaching this and doing it for years. But someone else, they don't even know what the heck that even means. Is that training with, 50 people instead of 100 people? Is that training with, 5 people instead of 2 people? Like, what is small group training? You need education to know what it is, and you need marketing to communicate why they should do it. And the reality was that's how most people sell small group training from a marketing perspective, right? They use small group training as the thing, right? They use the term small group training, or some use semi-private, and some like whatever. Like, who cares? Like, nobody cares about that stuff. They care about what small group training will do for them, and they care about why they should do it. Right? That's what needs to be communicated in marketing. What needs to be communicated in marketing is why someone should do it and how people like them are having success with it. Right? So that's really the big mistake, right? And it's weird to say this, right? The big mistake in marketing small group training is talking about small group training. And this place didn't even get to the point where they talked about the features, right? The features are, how many people are in a group, and the features are what equipment you're using and stuff like that. And that's the next level of marketing. So the first level is putting up a sign and saying horse for sale, right? Small group training for sale. That's the most base level of marketing. But the second level of marketing is you talk about the features of it, the class size and the equipment, as I just mentioned, right? But what you really need to start talking about is what are the benefits, right? What are the benefits of small group training? Why should people in your market do small group training? And you can do that without talking about small group training. I'd even mention it. After marketing my own gym for 13 years, I don't know if I've ever mentioned what our ratio is. I don't think I have. I don't think I've ever mentioned our ratio and how many people we train per session in any of our marketing. So the reality of it is if you want to market small group training well, you want to focus on the benefits of small group training, not the features, not that you actually do it. So hopefully this was helpful. I'm going way, way, way deep into this on September 24th and 25th at my webinar. The webinar is titled How to Get 20 New Small Group Training Clients in 30 Days. If you head on over to vincesmasterclass.com, you could register for free. So go to vincesmasterclass.com and register for free for our free webinar on small group training, marketing small group training on September 24th and 25th. It's vincesmasterclass.com. See that?
Hey everyone, welcome to Getting Started with VBT, or Velocity-Based Training, brought to you by Perch. Perch is a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing velocity-based training into the 21st century. I am Nico Willett, and I'm the head of marketing and education for Perch. And in this series on the Strength Coach podcast, we cover all things related to velocity-based training. Now, we've talked a little bit about using VBT in the weight room to impact on-field performance, a bit about periodization, and some about velocity drop as well. Those are all adjacent to what I want to discuss today, using VBT to monitor and track fatigue. There are many ways coaches can monitor athlete readiness or fatigue levels. Force plates and vertical jumps and grip strength measures for objective data are some options, and subjective methods like daily questionnaires and ratings of perceived exertion or RPE are also factored in. Now, tracking fatigue with VBT is an area of growing research as well. Deviations from an individual's baseline on any given day can dictate the need for the training load or volume for that day to fluctuate up or down based on performance. Now, the main reason to check athlete readiness in a weight room is to assess that fatigue and understand how a program may need to be altered to accommodate it. We can then prescribe the most accurate training load and volume possible for our athletes, and therefore we can decrease the incidence of overtraining and risking injury, or undertraining and not properly developing the individual for the needs of the sport. There are two considerations for the best ways to assess fatigue with VBT. Now, number one is consistency. Consistency is key. You're going to need to gather consistent data for each athlete to understand why and when they are ready to go, whether they're fatigued or in danger of overtraining. And the only way to do this is by tracking it consistently, so you actually have a baseline to understand what that performance is indicating. Number two is jump squats. Jump squats are the quickest way to implement testing. Not only will you get real-time feedback for how fatigued an athlete is, but this is all going to be stored in the cloud. And in this way, you can track longitudinal data to understand deviations from that baseline that we discussed in number one. And as a bonus, you'll get a quick explosive movement in for pre-lift as well. To start gathering data, we recommend a dowel or barbell squat jump, depending on the training age of the athlete. 1 attempt, 3 jumps, make your assessment, and then get to lifting. One of the biggest benefits of using VBT is that readiness assessments can also take place during the lift. If an athlete is consistently underperforming on their set velocity with a weight that they typically can do, it is likely that they're fatigued, and you can assess that during the lift in real time and make adjustments to provide the right stimulus. This means that you don't have to waste precious time in the weight room with assessments. You can do it on the floor with that VBT device. Tracked consistently over time, you'll get a really good understanding of readiness and fatigue, and you can use that data in conjunction with on-field training plans to program effectively, both in the weight room and out on the field. In this way, we can prevent overtraining and injury and continuously improve athlete performance. And this is true for both in the weight room and again on that field of play. Making sure that we monitor athlete fatigue and readiness on a daily basis is paramount to optimizing their performance on the field throughout the season and minimizing the risk of injury. That is all for today. Thanks for listening. And if you have any more questions about VBT or want more information and special deals, head to perch.fit/strengthcoach. That is perch.fit/strengthcoach.
All right, now it's time for the Naamly Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach, brought to you by Naamly, the ultimate retention tool designed specifically for fitness coaches and gyms to help your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com, schedule a demo, you get a feel for what you can do with this incredible tool. Use the referral code STRENGTHCOACH to get started on your free 30-day trial. All right, today I have on Dr. Brian Yee. He's a PT and a DPT. He's a board-certified orthopedic clinical specialist and a fellow of the American Academy of Orthopedic Manual Physical Therapists. He's been published in the medical journal Spine, and he's been a contributor to a couple of rehabilitation textbooks. His latest book is Unresolved, Harnessing Your Movement Story to End Chronic Pain. And he wrote it to inspire others to take ownership of their body and their pain and to reassure them that there's a more comprehensive solution to pain than a test, diagnosis, or just an intervention. And there's also an accompanying podcast that's really good. I've listened to 4 or 5 episodes. And although I will have this caveat, it's, Brian, for the most part, wrote this for the lay person, but there is a lot to learn here, and you're going to see that as we talk today. So, Brian, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate the honor to do this podcast with you. Thanks for all the great work you're doing, get the message out there to educate the public as well as other professionals in a multidisciplinary fashion. It's an honor to be part of this conversation.
All right, thank you. And I love the way you're approaching this, and I think it's really the direction that we have to go in the future and get deeper into this with what you're talking about in Unresolved. But I kind of want to take a step back really quick. Probably not really quick, but I want to talk about your thoughts, because I think it relates a lot with the book. Your thoughts on really, let's say, the problem that physical therapy profession is facing. And when I say problem, I mean, really, for me, I feel like there's a perception out there, and it's not me. I'm not saying, as experienced as I am, I still have faith in physical therapists, but like my father-in-law or my father-in-law he's had 2 hip surgeries like 20 years ago. He's 88, but he is having some kind of low back into hip, down to knee pain, and he's gone. And he's the kind of person that always just wants to go to the doctor and get an MRI and get a pain medicine and then get a surgery, and that's what's scheduled on November 1st. But meanwhile, 6 months ago when he was feeling this pain, I'm like, well, why don't you try this stretch, or why don't you try that stretch, or do this first before you do that. Let's exhaust all the other things, but. I said to him, I go, what I want you to do is make sure you're finding a good physical therapist. He's like, oh, I'm not going to physical therapy. I won't need it. I'm like, what do you mean you won't need it? So he's like, that doesn't work. I'm just going to go there and they're going to give me exercises, but I could do those at home. And I'm like, I had been in this business for almost 20 years. I had knee surgery in December. I made sure I was in crazy shape going in. I went to my physical therapist, and I was even mad at my doctor because he wouldn't let me go to physical therapy until I saw him a week later. But so anyway, I'm the one going to physical therapy twice a week for 4 weeks, and I recovered obviously really well. I had a really good physical therapist, Patellar. But that's my kind of rant about this thing, is like, I feel like there's this consumer perception that quote unquote it doesn't work, there's some industry things that are forcing this kind of cookie cutter or big approach to it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you're asking a question whether or not what's our perception of what that kind of default or dysfunction of where the consumer or the patient is not seeking proper care, whether it be from the patient perspective or even from the practitioner industry standards, how it works. There's a disconnect somewhere. I'm hearing that's what you're kind of asking of my perceptions on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I want to know, like, where is that disconnect and what's going wrong? Because to me, obviously I've had Charlie as my physical therapist for when I was living in New York, and now I have Bryce, and they're 2 amazing therapists, and they've taken an individual approach. But where is the disconnect, and why is there a disconnect?
Yeah, so from a physical therapy perspective, like I'll always take ownership on my own like trade or industry first, and we tie back to consumerism and how that perception as well. But from a physical therapy perspective, actually, even in the training world, like the more you reach out to the younger people, they're not going to be as skilled to handle certain things. First of all, so that's one. So physical therapy gets caught in a wrap, especially in the rehab mode, of very small corrective exercises. Oh, you have a knee pain, you have a back pain. Here's your sheet of exercises that seem very minuscule. So the return investment, in my mind, in physical therapy, a lot of times the way the industry is set up, and also the perception of what the patient experiences in the therapy clinic itself, I think the ROI is not very good. Meaning the exercises seem very minuscule. So like, well, why don't you stand here and save my time to do this, pay money when I can do this myself at home? They seem very minuscule. They don't seem very direct, and they don't seem very purposeful. So like you said, you've seen a physical therapist, a very good physical therapist. They're probably much more intentional about what they did, probably more hands-on identified really the issue of what your ailment is, hip, back, knee, shoulder, doesn't matter, and really identifying so you actually see a value of going to see a physical therapist. I think that's a needed transaction to happen from any customer service industry, business, medicine, healthcare, food industry, doesn't matter. If you don't provide a return investment that the patient doesn't see a value to it, they're going to walk away and say, that was a waste of my time. So that's one in my mind. Just I think a lot of physical therapists, the way the industry is running, there's so much need with insurance reimbursement decreasing. There's more need to see patients faster, less often, more double booking, triple bookings. On a traditional physical therapy practice, my practice doesn't do that. But the patient perception is like, I was there for an hour, I saw the therapist for 10 minutes, and I got a sheet of exercise I could do at home. Why would I go to physical therapy? That's my, I don't want to bash my own physical therapy profession, but that's kind of what's the nature of what the industry is pushing towards. And so I think the perception to the patient is that. On the flip side, people also don't want to do the work. They want to be validated on getting an X-ray or get a blood test to get a validation of the diagnosis, rather than understanding, taking ownership of their own movement to actually their own body, to actually how it moves, can actually change their pain. I think perception as a whole, the way society works right now, especially in Western or American society, is that they want to have a validation of a label, and that label of the X-ray says you have degeneration or arthritis or stenosis, validates their feelings of why the pain's there. And then they want to have a quick action reaction of, I need to then, I want to get X-ray or surgery, give me a pill, they'll legalize, marijuana. There's things you can do now that can mitigate your pain. I'd rather do it faster, quicker than actually do the work. So I think there's kind of a twofold reason why there's a breakdown where physical therapy really can help from a properly skilled clinician, and then a person like yourself who's dedicated to take ownership of their own body to actually get it moving better so they can actually feel better. So it's kind of a twofold answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. And I think because I don't know the behind the scenes with therapists, with insurance, and obviously I've heard the rumblings about it. But yeah, I mean, for me, I knew like I need to go into this in as best shape as I can, and then I need to do like when Bryce was giving me things, like let's say he had me using the mobility stick or he had me using a certain band. I got online, purchased it from Perform Better. Obviously, I'm a really good patient from that perspective. But I know, and Bryce has since left that place because they wanted the 3, 4, 5 people at a time. Whereas at least when I went in, he kind of scheduled me around not getting in there when it was busy.
Well, it's funny in the training world, at least my perception as a physical therapist, you have a higher grade performance therapist, and you charge your rate, you think you're worth, or you can command rate wise, and you deserve it, right? And then you have other programs such as the blanket, CrossFit programs, Orange Theory, or other just general fitness programs that people know you're going to pay cheaper rate or monthly subscriptions. They know they're going to get less attention, and they choose to do that for certain reasons. But then some people choose to pay more money for a private trainer that is highly skilled and stuff like that. I think the problem in physical therapy is you have your health insurance, and you have this thing that you think you can pay a $20 copay, and you're paying a high premium for the insurance benefit. So you pay then $20 copay, and you expect to then get high quality service for that $20 copay. Does that make sense? There's a reverse psychology because you have this health insurance you're paying for through corporate benefits, or you're a small business owner, things like that. You want to be able to use that at a cheaper rate to pay your premium, pay your copays, finally get paid off once you're deductible. So you want to get high quality care with that, and you're expecting from a healthcare physical therapist perspective that you expect them to get undivided attention, undivided high quality care with that $20 copay. And the hard part is we all trying to do that, but some of the systems won't let you. It's actually very hard sometimes when you're getting reimbursed $70 a visit from an insurance provider, and you're like, how do we pay the bills? And you want to pay the therapist well, and then they have school loans to pay off. So we also have graduate school loans to pay off that are just off the charts now. So there's this like triangulation of like reverse flow working against you constantly, that the system as well as financial dollars are working against physical therapists. And again, that's not knocking strength and conditioning coaches at all, but I think actually the fluidity and this infrastructure you guys set up for yourselves is actually a lot better. It's kind of like I'm actually jealous of dentists. Like dentists, where they help set up healthcare insurance for themselves way back when they broke away from medical insurance. They were very wise to do that, meaning, hey, we have a separate insurance policy. Dental insurance gives you 2 free cleanings a year. And then if you have a problem, we can do your cavities. It's going to charge you more money, blah, blah, blah. I think they did it wonderfully in terms of how they set up their dental care with health insurance. I think that's a model that we all should have gone after. But we're all thrown under the medical insurance model with medical care, oncology care, diabetes care, all under one roof for premiums. And you expect your health insurance to work for you at high caliber care. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you think if you had, like with physical therapists, that maybe they should do that? Hey, come in for your evaluation that's covered under your physical therapy insurance, and twice a year. And if there's any other problems, you might have to pay a little bit more. But let's stay on top of this. Let's make sure, let's nip it in the bud quicker. And you could still give them, people would still be able to give them the exercise. But I think people seeing a physical therapist twice a year, like a dentist, I didn't even think about that. It's brilliant.
It would be interesting. I think the chiropractors have tried to do that or are doing that actually in some states. I don't know, actually. You might know better than I would. I think chiropractors have tried to play that stance of, and there's great valid reasons of spinal adjustments and other things to be your spinal doctor and let's do prevention work. Definitely there's a value set there. Like I said, from the other flip side, from a consumer standpoint, you know that you go to the dentist not to get a cavity, so you get your clean, so you prevent cavities. I don't think people really know about your spinal health, your movement health would prevent chronic back pain in the future. So there'd be a lot of education to tell the client or the society as a whole that if you do X, Y, Z, you'll have less chance of hurting your back. The hard part about chronic pain, which is kind of where my lane is at, as a physical therapist, there's so many different types of physical therapists, Charlie and all the great work he does. And I know he deals with chronic pain, but, the sports performance world, I do that stuff. I do some golf stuff, things like that. But my lane, I really have kind of carved out is this idea of unresolved pain, the idea that pain that keeps lingering, why is it still there? And not chronic pain. We use the word chronic pain in my mind kind of denotes more of a depression, hopelessness, you kind of dealing with the rest of your life. Unresolved, that wording kind of proposes more of there's a still sense of hope. There's still something missing. We can figure it out if you find the right person to work it out. And so we use this coined terminology unresolved instead to be more of a mystery detective work than anything. So my lane in physical therapy, just as a specialist, even in performance world, my lane in physical therapy is to tell you kind of the whole story of why your pain's still there. You've seen strength people, doctors, physical therapists, chiropractors, massage therapists, there's still something there and nobody can figure it out. I've kind of then created a caveat or a parallel or lane to kind of put myself in that position. That's kind of where I contribute to the healthcare world. I can't fix everything, but that's kind of where I kind of put myself into.
Yeah, I love the distinction that you made there between chronic and unresolved and just kind of changing it. But can you go deeper into just defining chronic pain as opposed to, whether somebody's, feels it all the time, or is it something that somebody's feeling all the time or just at certain times of the day? Or can you just go a little deeper with that?
I mean, by medical definition, I think even by insurance policies too, I'm not trying to get all being an insurance provider or insurance advocate. I'm actually very, very would like to get away from it. But even the medical research will actually technically quantify chronic pain as anything that lingers longer than 3 months. Any pain, doesn't matter on a scale of 1 to 10 or not, any pain that lingers longer than 3 months would be considered chronic pain from a medical textbook research standpoint. The 3-month mark is considered chronic pain. That's very umbrella, large picture, blanket terminology. So then from there, chronic pain pain in general becomes very relative to that person, as you know, right? So pain's experiential, pain's not quantifiable in terms of objective from an X-ray or blood test. Pain is an experiential thing that you yourself in your own mind perceive based upon, I just studied a gentleman named Lorimer Mosley in Australia, talks about pain as a threat. So if you perceive that pain as disrupting your life for certain reasons, that pain will become pain in your head, in your perception. So pain is a very relative terminology to who that person is, based upon not only biological, physical structures, but psychological, as well as social constructs, your cultural upbringing, your financial situation, your whatever situation, your trauma history in the past, and what you perceive as pain and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. The pain idea. We've had a couple different. I've never had Dr. Mosley on, but I tried to get him on. It was just pretty hard to get him on years ago.
He's a pretty popular guy.
Yeah. But the whole pain thing is so interesting to me. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to talk about, we are going to talk more about pain right now, actually, the movement story and the pain narrative. Because I'll be honest with you, when I first saw that, I was like, oh boy, how long is this going to take? Right. Because, people, that's what people do. They're going to be like, well, I want it quickly. But then when I started to get deeper into the book, that's about the area that I got into in the section, and I listened to the podcast. It's fascinating to really understand how important it is, and it can be, to really dig super deep. So let's dig deeper into the movement story and the pain narrative, and what are some of the things that you want to know in that story?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, right, so this is, I mean, you talk to mindfulness people, psychological counselors, things like that, right? So the whole thing is self-reflection, right? So even the book I wrote, it's not a self-help book. It's not the 5 tips to back pain. It's not the 5 tips how to fix your back with whatever device or needles or foam rolls and stuff. All this stuff's valid, right? The book is really a self-reflection book, right? So the same idea we talked about your father-in-law or someone who doesn't want to take ownership of their own body. If they don't self-reflect and take ownership of who they are, they won't take action moving forward, right? So kind of take 2 steps back, reflect, and then move forward. Same thing with people who are motivated to do strength and conditioning. Like if they don't recognize that, hey, like you better get your heart going, and then take a reflection of your medical history, maybe things you had in the past, then they'll make more action forward and actually make proactive approaches. So the whole movement story and pain narrative is it can sound very lengthy and very methodical and boring. It is simply a challenge and coin terminology just to self-reflect on your past, right? And the trauma counselors that make you do that, stuff like that. But, I'm a physical therapist, right? So I do orthopedic chronic pain of musculoskeletal neural components. And again, people are coming with chronic back pain, raging pain in a leg. It won't get better. They're fixed on the present moment that X-ray says this. But if you had 3 people in the same back pain, same nerve pain, they fell in the same, curve and fell in their tailbone, why is it one person has chronic back pain or exacerbating pain versus the other 2 who fell the same way? You have to take a look back at the context of who that person is that gets to that point, right? So same body type, same everything, and one person of the 3 gets hurt. Why is that person? It's usually their movement story, their pain narrative, looking back in their past of different injuries they've had, different body types they have, different injuries they've had, different sports they've played, their own psychological affect of how they perceive their injury, all amplifies why they have that pain at the moment and why we continue, and also why we'll continue on moving forward. So that word movement story is this whole day and age is all about story, right? Tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. And so we just came with a terminology of movement story. We actually wanted to call your pain story initially. And I kind of did some beta testing with people that say, oh, when I was sexually abused as a child, but like, that's what you're talking about. Like, no, like I'm a physical therapist. So I learned to kind of stay in my lane.
Oh,
I'm a physical therapist, right? So look at your movement history, what you've done in the past, what injuries you've had, what sports you played, and that will quantify, give you a build-up effect of the pain you have now. So in the book, we use this thing called your movement story graph, this idea of a very structural, like XY graph of this analogy of like a chemistry set of an action potential. So you have the sodium chloride, you drop in, you just drop in some sodium with another chemical, and you keep dropping things. And eventually that last drop of sodium, also the beaker explodes, right? That's some kind of chemical action potential, which we all know from a pain perception. That's like a peripheral nociceptive, sensitized tissue that gets sensitized, it gets inflamed. I'm not sure how much your listeners understand just the basic mechanisms of pain, but that buildup effect of that tipping point or that nociceptive response where pain happens is usually a buildup effect of other injuries, other chronic tissues, other scar tissue, other movement patterns that over time builds up to that epiphany where you finally get the tipping point where pain happens. Outside of a trauma injury, like a football contact injury or a car accident, usually non-contact injuries from even weightlifting, and then also that injury happens, you're like, where'd that come from? That didn't come from out of the blue. That came from a buildup effect from something. So squat racks, sumo squats, also in your knee strains, you blow your back out. Look back at your movement story of your different injuries you've had, and then figure out, well, if my body changed because of my ankle sprain when I was a kid, and when I squat, I can't ankle dorsiflex on one ankle versus the other. Yeah, when I squat rack bilateral, my right hip's probably going to give because my ankle can't bend. We all kind of know that, but that's kind of the summary of you better address the scar tissue and the mobility in your ankle to allow yourself to squat in your ankle to allow your hip to take the proper form so you don't hurt your hip or your back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I went through it. I actually had a tear in my right ankle. I forget the exact place, and I went to my doctor and he wanted to do surgery. So I text Charlie and I said, hey, can you look at this? And he goes, you know what? I'd rather have you just go to my friend Josh Dines over at Hospital Special Surgery. So I did. And he was like, look, this is fine. And by the way, I was kind of like feeling that pain in my right foot. Talk about your brain. So I was feeling it. And that's why I went to the doctor. Originally, he wanted to give me surgery. So then I'm feeling like almost like it was worse. Charlie sent me to Josh Dines. He said, listen, I cut people for a living. It's how I make money. But I don't want to do this right now. He goes, I think you can get physical therapy go back to Charlie, have him work with you. And in 6 months, it's not going to be any harder or any worse than for me to do the surgery. So don't worry, go to Charlie first. Brian, I was literally skipping out of the hospital special surgery, knowing that, and by the way, so I did it. When I did it with Charlie, so I rode my bike there and everything, and I was like so excited, and I kind of stopped feeling a lot of the pain. And then when I started going to Charlie, by the way, it was my right ankle. He was mostly working, like doing dry needling and doing some different movements on my left lower leg. So to your point, like he wasn't looking at my ankle. He was looking at what was going on he was asking me certain questions and what I was doing where other things were feeling. So it's really important.
Yeah. So that's the whole thing, right? So you were wise enough to go find someone and you found someone to refer to who would actually look at the bigger picture to figure out all these different components to work with, right? So typically someone who got ankle surgery or ankle pain went to see a doctor's like, you don't need a surgery, just do some basic rehab, go. And so the validation that you don't need surgery, yay, I don't need a surgery. And then pain will go down, right? Most times pain subsides, right? So the misconception now is if you don't, pain and inflammation happens, swelling happens, swelling turns into scar tissue. And once your pain calms down, your brain's like, well, I'm good to go again. And you don't recognize you're missing 2 degrees of dorsiflexion in your ankle and your subtalar joint started to evert a little bit or invert, whatever. And then in your world that you're dealing with higher level load, this day and age of sports performance, load. But if you're off by 2% at the higher level capacity in the professional athletes or people who do high level fitness stuff, that 2% change in your ankle proprioception, mobility, stability, whatever you want to call it, eventually will catch up to you somewhere, right? So that way, it may be the ankle pain again, but it may be the left hip, it might be even your neck. There's all these cross-torsional patterns and functional swing patterns that happen. You guys all know this stuff. Like, so the idea is all of a sudden your body starts compensating, and then all of a sudden you have pain somewhere else, and then you start chasing after. Now your left shoulder hurts because your left lat connects to your right glute, and your right glute doesn't work because your right ankle is stiff. If you don't go back to the roots of that previous injury you had, you keep pushing your body to a higher level, you're going to keep chasing after things from a pain perspective, from a patient perspective, until you figure out, well, the ankle dorsiflexion off 2% or 2 degrees, really need to get that going, especially if you're a big squat person or an Olympic lifter or runner, sprinter. That 2 degrees difference is huge, as you know. Needs to be fully addressed and then fully teach your body to load properly, symmetrically, and then in that sport-specific position so that you can handle that load in that sport or activity or performance activity you're doing. So again, I deal with chronic pain, but I deal with chronic pain in athletes too, right? So that's just chronic pain when people have psychological issues and depressed, whatever. I mean, high-level athletes also have affective disorders as well because they're obsessed with exercising sometimes, but they also need to perform because they're professional athletes. So a lot of different reasons why. So we see unresolved pain in high-level performing injuries just as much as we see people who are less athletic. They come all different ways in terms of lifestyles.
Yeah, I think also again, the book kind of reminded me and the podcast kind of reminded me about what's been going on. I had a meniscus surgery in December on that same right side. So right. And then 3 weeks ago, I hadn't really gotten into the gym in a little bit. I've been working out, but not into like a real gym. So I was doing some deadlifting and I wasn't even going that heavy, and I paired them with pull-ups. Anyway, there was no specific time when I was like, "Ooh, that hurt." But later on, the left side, my neck was really bothering me, and my left like lower back. And I went to massage, and he just went over a bunch of stuff that he was feeling in the neck and the lats, etc. But then I was thinking, wow, so there's the ankle that maybe led to the knee, and that knee over time, maybe there was some kind of compensation on that whole left side, right? That it created this.
Yeah.
Right? So you really, I want you to just go deeper into what are you looking, because I know in the beginning you're like, okay, where does it hurt? And can you go over the process? Like you're going to give them the body diagram, and then you can talk about all that.
Yeah, so I mean you just painted your own pain narrative, your own movement story right there, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, if I can summarize back to you kind of what I heard from you, to say, I mean, we're not even physically seeing your body, but I'm assuming your left neck hurt because like you said, you compensate for your left side. So, going back to your question, the summary of what all that happened right there. So if we pinpoint your first injury as your ankle sprain or your ankle foot injury, the pain process there, right, is swelling, inflammation happens. Again, pain is perceptive, right? So pain will calm down, but then you can have still some residual swelling as well as inflammation, and that calms down, that creates scar tissue, right? So scar tissue can lose mobility, you can also lose proprioception, you can lose strength, and then you lose coordination of how to use that ankle. You start saying, because your pain is less, or you feel fine pain-wise, you just start going back to your things. All of a sudden, you get a meniscal tear on your right knee because your ankle is no longer moving the way it should. You end up compensating, putting weight into your knee. You rupture or tear your meniscus. You hurt meniscus. You get the surgery done, and then you're like, oh, great, my knee's feeling better. I got full range of motion. I start squatting. I wasn't going heavy load, just kind of being careful, but not knowing that as you're squatting, your right glute probably wasn't working as well, probably because your ankle's stiff or a little bit stiff, knees wasn't functioning right. Glute complex couldn't stabilize. As you know, the glute's the strongest muscle in your body. And then your left latissimus muscle functionally connects to your right glute. So you will automatically start pulling from your left lat harder because your right glute's not stabilizing. I've seen in cyclists, people who push down through a pedal on the right side, the glute's not firing and your quad's not firing properly. The left arm will pull harder to the handlebar to counter stabilize. So you start pulling weight to your left lat. Your shoulder pulls down, it's downward scap rotation. That pulls your shoulder blade down, your upper trap and levator scapula, then start pulling harder to pull your shoulder back up. And then that kind of pulls into your C2 to C7 complexes. All of a sudden you get a facet sprain or neck impingement or herniated disc, whatever kind of neck pain you have. That'd be like the story of like, I don't even know how long ago you hurt ankle, but that build-up effect of ankle injury to probably, my guessing, that's probably somewhere a 4 or 5 year cycle that's developed over time, if not longer. And it takes time for that to manifest itself, especially for somebody who starts weightlifting, trying to be careful, but still putting more load in your body. Eventually, your body asymmetrically wide will respond asymmetrically and cause pain somewhere else. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, then, I also want to know how deep you go, because also, obviously, you don't know, I've been doing a lot of rucking over the last 3 years and 4 years. And, so I have like heavy loads on my back, and then I'm always moving. I have a dog. So we walk, my steps are usually 12 to 14,000, a day. And, a quarter of that is with the backpack on. And I ride my bike to work. And, there's I take the stairs every day, up 4 flights, 5 times a day, blah, blah, blah. So how deep do you go in? Because a lot, I think it was that show House, he used to say, everybody's a liar. How hard is it to get that story out of people?
Yeah, no. So actually, I love it. So one, I'm amazed by the work and the fitness you put into stuff. That's encouraging and inspiring to me. First of all, that is exactly what I go. So the first session, we'll sit down and say, all right, where's your pain? And then we just kind of start talking from there. Okay, what do you do? What's your physical activity? And really keep diving down. So the answer is yes. I probably most likely would have extrapolated all information out of you on the first visit to really put in context. Okay, this guy probably is really, I've met you in person, but I'm sure you're in great shape, things like that. But to what degree do you do your physical activity all day long, all week long? What rhythms, what rest regimens do you do? What recovery work do you do? All these things put in nature of what threshold your body can handle and what kind of likelihood of breakdown your body's going to go through eventually. Does that make sense? So the whole point is yes. The answer is yes. If you don't put into full context everything you do, you're going to miss the point. Because also then functionally, if your knee's going to hurt because you're walking downstairs all the time, like you just got to understand that, because you might just see you're just weightlifting, but the fact you're actually climbing stairs 4 flights, 5 flights a day, that's awesome. But that needs to be put in context of your physical activity related to the neck pain you have, right? So you're walking stairs with your legs, but that actually has a build-up effect to your left neck pain. So if you don't put that in context of your symptoms of somewhere else that you're not even using as much, you got to put that in context of the fact your ankle, your knee are doing a lot of repetitive work. Eventually your body's compensating, pulling from the left side of your neck. And that's why you have chronic, let's say you had chronic neck pain. That's why we have to address your ankle, because you're putting so much daily activity and stress and load and repetition on your lower body that's not as functional on that one right side. And then your pain on your left side's there.
Absolutely. How are you getting this information? Are you also getting some information ahead of time, like say, okay, fill this form out, like with your medical history? Because then when I first started reading the book, I'm thinking, wow, what did I have in my teens, or, oh yeah, I broke my arm when I was in 11th grade. And then, you start to think about all these little, but I'll forget some things. But how do you get all this information from people? Is it, first before the visit and then you're going to talk to them? Because people are going to be like, hey man, I thought you were going to like help me with my pain today.
Yeah, no, the funny thing, actually, it would be fun to create some kind of phone app or some kind of history intake of the information, and we can look at it beforehand. But to be honest with you, I do 1 patient per hour, first of all. So especially every patient, whether it be initial evaluation or follow-up visit, I do 1 patient per hour. So just gives you the time to fully ask the questions. So on the first visit, a simple intake form, paper, a body diagram where you draw a silhouette picture and draw your pain, and then just listing your history of injuries as well as your medical conditions you've had. To be honest with you, is enough for me to start off of. I can get enough information on the body diagram if someone X marks their left neck, and then also like X marks their right ankle. I'm already seeing a functional swing pattern. So I'm personally, as you can tell, I'm talking a little fast on this podcast. I'm a fast thinker, fast processor. So I see even my staff I work with, 7 therapists or amazing therapists that work on my team. I'm a fast processing pattern thinker. So in any kind of world, whether it be a garbage man or restaurateur or stuff like that, people who spend time in their trade, you develop patterns of thinking, right? You see patterns quicker than someone who's more novice. So I've been in this game for a long time, 20 plus years, and I just see patterns quickly. I see things very visually. So for me, my life is a life of film strips, so like old 35 millimeter picture slides. I see pictures quickly. So I see someone walk down a hallway, I can see patterns a lot faster than most of my clinicians can, who are still amazing therapists. So for me, my ability to expedite information quickly, and then taking the time to ask qualifying questions about things such as, how much stairs do you climb a day? Those things add to your hypothesis, because you don't want to go and say, I know exactly what it is from the body diagram. You have to be very careful not to pigeonhole that person right away. Have your assumptions or your hypotheses, and then use your qualifying questions as well as your objective examination, physical examination, to then validate things. Where I think a lot of clinicians will go in and they start testing, and they're trying to diagnose without a hypothesis, and they start dovetailing almost in the book we call it confirmation bias. A lot of people also want to then use those tests or to things in movements or X-rays to validate their thinking, as opposed to have a hypothesis, multiple of them, and then work through your process of interview and examination to then disqualify a couple of hypotheses to get to a final diagnosis that ruled out different things. That's why I learned in Australia. So they call it clinical reasoning, very deductive, critical thinking, where American healthcare, again, very triage-based. X-ray says this, then do this, right? Back pain says this, do this protocol of back exercises, right? It's a very cause and effect. We were taught very much more to think bigger picture, look at the whole situation, look at the whole narrative, discount things first before you confirm. That I think is probably the most valuable lesson learned in Australia is don't just assume you know what the answer is from the get-go. Almost try to devalidate your assumptions to make sure you get to that point where you know exactly where it is by disqualifying certain things to be confirmed by it. And then once you see those patterns, you see them faster. That's kind of where I'm at in my career now in profession doing 20 plus years, is I'd be able to disqualify things faster to then validate my prognosis and my diagnosis and prognosis to then treat the patient.
And I really believe all this that you're saying too. Like there's a certain level and we want to stay in our lane. and I know even on your podcast you say that a few times because you work with other psychologists and et cetera, a lot of different people, a lot of different doctors that you would refer out to when it gets to be maybe over your head for certain, when it's not in your lane. I mean, I feel like there's so much that we can do as even as personal trainers or strength coaches to find out, still get this information that could really help us. Obviously, not with pain when somebody's in real pain, we got to send them out. But to find out some things that to uncover some things and to kind of lead us into a better direction.
Absolutely. I mean, the symbiotic relationship between strength coaches and personal trainers and physical therapists should be happening on a daily basis. It's whether it be business or territory, or sometimes there's some politics or even clinical overlapping. Almost sometimes people are overextending themselves past their lane, creates a little animosity, things like that. We've seen different breakdowns of dialogues. But in a truistic world, and I have some amazing trainers I work with here in Atlanta who just do an amazing job. I can then pass to that person and then communicate to them what I think is going on, and then vice versa. Say, hey, I'm trying to load this person a little more. What do you think? And then we kind of work together as a team. That's actually, I have some great trainers in Atlanta I work with. It's been a blessing because they can get the athlete or even just general populace person to a higher level that I can. I can get them out of pain, get their functional pattern moving, corrective exercise, do some plyometric or explosion work. But I'm very content not trying to figure out the whole thing at one time. That's just not me. So I'm very comfortable in not being in that environment. So I mean, literally, my first really private practice career, I started in a Nike golf performance facility where we had a 3D imaging swing analysis room with the golf profession, looking at swing analysis, club head speed, kinematic sequence, things like that. And then we had golf-specific personal trainers. We had Pilates instructors, stretch therapists, and myself as a physical therapist. So we literally would work as a team together to talk about this golfer and then figure out, okay, their main goal is to swing better as well as not be in pain, right? So we would all work together and have this dialogue together and recognize that this person is really not swinging well because their hip is stiff and their hip is hurting. Go see Brian first, get that moving on. That gets better, and then work in conjunction or in transition to the trainer to get the flexibility, overall conditioning better, and with the swing coach, then get your swing better along with it. And the swing coach knows that the hip is stiff, is modifying the swing for short term until the hip mobility works better, and then they change the swing based upon how the body works better, and they can maximize the swing. That was a huge blessing to be able to work in that environment. It's very hard to keep that infrastructure going, but that I think when you have those kind of teams of people, the client wins. And I think that the practitioners wins as well and stuff like that. So they're unique situations, but they're great situations. I
agree. I mean, I was at the first Titleist Performance Institute Summit in 2006, and had my own golf fitness facility as well. And it was one of the hardest things. It was the message I loved most, and it resonated with me that Greg Rose talked about and was building a team. And I loved the way they did that with having fitness pros, golf pros, and medical professionals all in the same room for level 1, and then kind of making sure even in the level 2s and the level 3s that you understood at least a little bit about the medical side and the more about the swing side, but you still were in your lane and they wanted you to work as a team. It's actually how Charlie and I really met, by the way, because he called me. We were friends, quote unquote friends, through Body by Boyle or Mike Boyle's forum and strengthcoach.com, but he asked me about Titleist, and that's why he called me originally about the TPI program. So it's kind of funny, but
yeah.
I think it's a good segue, and kind of like my last question while we wrap up here is, in the book, you did say the body's built to be symmetrical. Any imbalance can lead to injury. So I just want to ask you about this because I know the guys at PRI have said, there's some, things that are naturally asymmetrical. And even with Greg Rose talking about the golf swing is so asymmetrical, and should we be working on those asymmetries, which are almost like our strengths, and not worried about that? But can you kind of just expand on this idea of, you say the body is built to be symmetrical, any imbalance can lead to injury, which we've heard a lot of times, obviously from Greg Cook, et cetera.
Yeah, great question. That's this high level thinking of asymmetries need to happen, and especially in golf and certain things like that. So not to say you have to be completely symmetrical like golf. In other ways, that might be detrimental. First of all, in chronic pain, so we're talking people more the general populace, people who are just trying to live daily lives. First of all, who are not golfers, just to be able to squat down, to be able to walk, daily functional activities, I think, should be very symmetrical. And the more symmetrical you are, to do repetitive activities that you would even ride a bike, walk a couple miles, get your 10,000 steps. If you're asymmetrical, it's going to show itself up somewhere, right? So activities that require symmetry or daily life functional activities typically are more symmetrical based. So I would say that as a qualifier. From there are sports and activities that require asymmetry that I would say you need to train into asymmetry to allow yourself to do that asymmetrical sport. But if you go over the top and train overboard and not for example, if you're a right-handed golfer, like it's probably good to swing left-handed once in a while to keep your muscles balanced. And I'm sure there's different dissertational debates about whether you should do that or not. I don't want to go that direction, but the point is if you keep overtraining yourself only to go right rotation on your takeback only, you're going to overdevelop that right side too much, eventually getting injured. So to have a counterbalance of some sense of symmetry in those asymmetrical sports, I'd probably argue that. So then from there, I would say from a chronic pain standpoint, I'm always intrigued by youth sports development, probably because my kids are 15, 13, and 9, all playing volleyball and tennis and ballet and stuff like that. And my number one, the thing I was intrigued by is like soccer players, like the kids who played club soccer at 5 years old. They go through, 17 years old, and they predominantly kicked on the right leg and they stood on the left, and they create through years of playing soccer, create like a tibial varum, like a bow-leggedness on the left leg, because they get bony shaft changes on the left shin because they stood to the left leg more and kicked with their right. That developed a structural asymmetry as a child that then they try to live life as a normal adult, riding a bike, walking, go for a run, try to be a marathon runner, achieving at 35 years old just to run a marathon. But if your left leg's now bow-legged, that's asymmetrical compared to your other leg that's not. You're going to get different stresses on your left leg or even your right shoulder or even right hip as your body compensates the fact that your stresses doing symmetrical activities running down 26 miles. One leg is not doing the same work as the other. The stresses are different. So the idea is symmetry in my mind is the more symmetrical we can offset those things, the more likely we can be in less pain. So from an unresolved, like how you break your pain code, I'd say from a symmetry standpoint, the more you can aim towards symmetry, the better. But you talk about high performance injury stuff, you then need to start applying load to that function specific activity, even if it means it requires you to be asymmetrical. And then you need to train that body to the asymmetry that it requires. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Great answer. And on that, we will let you go. I'll remind everybody the book by Dr. Brian E., Unresolved, Harnessing Your Movement Story to End Chronic Pain. It is not just for the layperson. Read this book and check out the podcast as well. So, Doc, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 343 of the Strength Coach Podcast. You can try the new strengthcoach.com out 7 days for free. Totally new format. User-friendly, same great forum. As always, go to strengthcoach.com to get your free 7-day trial. Special thanks to Chris Poirier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, the huge summer sale, it's about to end. Summer's over, kids. It's going on right now, 40% off a ton of items, including the TRX suspension trainers, ultimate sandbags, all kinds of cleaning supplies, Rogel rulers, plyo boxes, and so much more. Check it out at performbetter.com. All right, thanks Coach Boyle and Dr. Brian E. for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning, performance enhancement, and unresolved pain. Thanks to Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication to your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com and use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on a free 30-day trial. Thanks to Vince Gabriele and KISS Marketing. If you need some help with your marketing, head over to kissmarketing.net to book a free coaching call with Will Matheson, Vince Gabriele's secret marketing weapon. Go to kissmarketing.net. Thanks to Nico Willett and Perch. Perch is a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing VBT into the 21st century. Head over to perch.fit/strengthcoach to find out more about it. They have some great videos there showing cameras and how they use them. That's going to do it. My name's Anthony Renna. Check out the show notes at continuefit.com or strengthcoachpodcast.com. Guys, thanks as always for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.